I said, "I'm the CEO now. Do what I say or get out of the way." That was the moment right there when Gavin Vance, whose resume was longer than his tenure anywhere, decided to publicly castrate 14 years of my work in front of 30 employees and the company espresso machine. He was standing over my desk, red in the face, waving his overpriced tablet like it came with a moral high ground. His voice cracked just slightly as he repeated it louder this time so the whole open plan floor could hear. "I run this company now. You're just legacy. Got it." Phone stopped ringing. Helen paused mid-sip on her yogurt drink. A guy from logistics pretended to type, but hit nothing but spacebar. Everyone knew something was coming, but no one knew what. I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't even flinch. I just looked up at Gavin, his hair gel holding on for dear life under the fluorescent lights, and nodded once, calm as a house fire. Then I stood, collected the legal pad I'd been using since 2013, and walked to my office. No words, no scene, just silence, because I knew something Gavin didn't. Oh, and before we get any deeper, if you're the kind of person who likes watching smug jackasses face plant in front of auditors, hit that like button and subscribe. I promise the paperwork's going to bite him exactly where you're hoping. And yeah, 93% of you don't subscribe, which is fine, but it kind of feels like Gavin getting promoted. You hate it, but you let it happen. Don't be like Gavin. Now, where were we? Ah, right, my office. The one Gavin said I wouldn't need for long. I closed the door, pulled the blinds halfway, not all the way. Never let him think you're hiding, and walked straight to the back cabinet. Not the digital stuff. He'd already revoked half my login credentials by then. I'm talking old-school 3-drawer powder coat gray metal with a sticky bottom roller. The kind that still smells like copper toner and stale Altoids. Top drawer HR files, irrelevant. Middle drawer, compliance reports, not yet. Bottom drawer, jackpot, there it was, the dusty leather-bound binder with the gold foil lettering, Apex Logistics Solutions Corporate Charter, revised 2009. Most of the execs had never even touched it. Gavin probably thought the charter was a character in Succession. But I remembered. I remembered every clause, every revision, every emergency protocol we'd passed during the 2010 restructuring, when a hostile takeover threatened to gut our contracts pipeline. That's when the board named me interim chair in a proxy vote. Temporary, sure, but no one ever amended it because no one ever thought I'd need to use it. I pulled out the binder, laid it on the desk, began flipping, slow, methodical, like disarming a bomb. And when I got to Section 3, Subsection 2.1, Board Governance and Change of Control, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Power. Not the loud kind Gavin liked to stomp around, not the performative spotlight-hogging nonsense investors mistake for leadership. This was the quiet kind, the kind that lives in signatures and bylaws, the kind that doesn't care if you have nice shoes, only cares whose name is on the dotted line. And mine was right there, Richard Cole, acting chair, unrescinded, still binding. It was like finding a forgotten sword in the attic after the new king tries to throw you in the dungeon. That moment, that's when I stopped being humiliated. That's when I stopped reacting and started remembering. Remembering every late night I stayed to review policy updates. Every time I flagged a risky vendor Gavin later called innovative. Every time I stayed silent, not because I was weak, but because I was storing ammunition. Let him pin. Let him cut department and rename teams and brag about streamlining org charts like we were a salad bar. Because when the real meeting came, the one with the auditors and lawyers and acquisition reps, he was going to need a signature. And mine, it was still the only one that counted. The next morning, Gavin held a mandatory leadership sync in conference room Alpha. I found out when Helen from compliance whispered it to me while nuking her oatmeal. "Didn't see you on the invite, Richard. Thought that was weird." It wasn't weird, it was war. By 9:15, I couldn't access my calendar. At 9:17, I was locked out of Slack. By 9:24, my company email was miraculously experiencing issues, and at exactly 9:30 got a calendar placeholder from HR titled Catch-Up Transition Planning. The word transition does a lot of heavy lifting in corporate America. Sometimes it means a promotion. Sometimes it means you're about to be replaced by a spreadsheet and a dude named Chad who just got his MBA in disrupting legacy systems. In my case, it meant Gavin wanted a clean break, but with enough plausible deniability to keep the board from asking too many questions. HR meeting was held in a sad beige room that smelled like nervous sweat and bubblegum hand sanitizer. Brenda from HR, God bless her now, looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. She greeted me with a forced smile and a manila folder labeled Voluntary Exit Framework. Richard, first let me say we appreciate your years of service here at Apex Logistics Solutions. Truly, she began flipping the folder open like she was performing surgery on a dying cat. Entering a new phase, and there's discussion of realigning senior leadership for operational agility. I said buzzwords. Nice. She blinked. Sorry, nothing. Continue. Inside the folder, a severance package that looked like it had been assembled by ChatGPT after 3 vodka Red Bulls. No mention of COBRA terms, vague language around equity vesting, not even a clear termination date. Just a whole lot of transitional support and optional early exit incentives. Then came the line, she must have rehearsed in the mirror. This is a good opportunity to consider what's next for you personally. Maybe early retirement, some well-deserved rest. You've earned it, aha, I said, scanning the papers. Before I consider any of that, can you confirm whether the board has ratified changes to the corporate charter? Brenda froze, like someone had pulled her plug. I'm not sure that's in the scope of HR. I closed the folder gently. Oh, it's in the scope. She adjusted her glasses, flustered. I can circle back with legal now, I suppose. Please do. And that was that. I walked out of the HR meat locker with the folder in one hand and a fire in the other. The kind of fire that doesn't burn hot. It just boils slow and steady beneath the surface. Back in my office, yes, still mine. I began pulling documents. Old meeting minutes, proxy votes, signatory logs, anything with ink and teeth. I didn't ask it to restore my access. I didn't argue with Gavin. I didn't even talk to the board because this wasn't about noise. This was about proof. He thought I'd slink away, that I'd take his insult and cash out quietly. But the thing about being underestimated, it buys you time. And silence makes people nervous in all the right ways. By noon, had a full print out of the 2010 restructuring packet, including a scanned copy of the proxy vote signed and notarized. Not a draft, not a proposal, a final filed and legally binding resolution naming me acting chair until further board action. And there had been no further board action. I could have danced, I could have screamed, but I just stapled it neatly and slipped it into a fresh red folder labeled Governance Retain. Around 3:00 in the evening, Gavin sauntered past my door, saw me working, and stopped just long enough to smirk. Everything okay in here? Need help logging into the retirement portal? I didn't look up. Everything's just fine, Gavin. He chuckled and walked away. Poor bastard. He thought the fight was over. He didn't know I just picked up the sword. By the end of Gavin's second week, the company smelled like a startup and bled like a crime scene, tore through departments like a chainsaw, through drywall, renamed operations to Momentum, canned the entire document control team, to Analog, and declared we'd be rebranding as Apex Vanguard, because Apex Logistics Solutions sounds like a snowplow company. He had a vision, apparently, one fueled by buzzwords and whatever podcast he was binging. During his cryotherapy sessions, there were foam core posters in the break room. Now slogans like "Move fast, own it." Pete, someone probably force-set them in PowerPoint font against glitchy images of mountain tops and gears. It was like getting screamed at by a text speaker inside a Word document. Then came the IPOs or Sexy Again speech, delivered at an all-hands he titled the Phoenix Briefing. Gavin stood under a literal spotlight. Yes, he brought one in, pacing like a deranged ringmaster. We're going to be leaner, smarter, more liquid, shedding dead weight and gearing up for something massive. Think Tesla meets Netflix meets. We don't even need a comparison. We are the future. Half the Zoom attendees muted him and did their taxes. Meanwhile, the engine of the company, the boring, efficient, quietly brilliant middle, started grinding to a halt. Vendor payments bounced because he fired the accounts payable lead who tracked cross-border tax compliance. Our internal tools broke because Gavin thought using Jira made us feel small. He forced us onto a half-baked productivity platform called Sprint Hawk, which promptly crashed during the first system-wide update. And morale, that thing people like to pretend doesn't matter. It evaporated. Martha from contracts left after 12 years when he from systems put in his 2 weeks and told everyone in the Slack goodbye thread that he was going to go find joy in a library basement. They weren't quitting the job. They were quitting him. I didn't say a word. Not in the meetings I was still technically allowed in, not in the ones I wasn't invited to attend. I just kept walking the halls like a ghost with a badge. Let him pretend to be king. His crown was paper, and his throne was already on fire. But what I did do quietly over coffee was meet with two of the remaining board members, Patricia and Donovan. We met at a tiny place off Euclid A that still did purvers and gave you exactly one napkin. They were uneasy. They'd both been on the board during the restructuring era and had invested too much into Apex Logistics Solutions to watch it become a punchline with a budget. Patricia stirred her coffee 4 times before she even looked at me. "We didn't think it would go like this," she said softly. "None of us did," I replied. Donovan leaned forward. "What's your take? Is this just posturing or damage?" "Real damage," I said. "He's not managing. He's performing, and the systems are starting to collapse." Patricia frowned, and the charter. "He's calling himself CEO. Did the board ever finalize those amendments from the January meeting?" I didn't answer right away. Just took a slow sip of my black coffee, let the silence bloom, then smiled. Donovan blinked. "Weren't you still technically chair?" I said, setting the cup down. "Yeah, far as I know." They looked at each other. "Has that been updated?" "Not to my knowledge," I said. "And I've got the filings to prove it." It was a soft moment. Quiet. No slamming of fists or raised voices. Just two people realizing the iceberg might have been smaller than they thought, but it was still moving. Patricia was the first to speak. "What are you planning?" "Nothing," I said yet. The kind Gavin wouldn't see coming until it was too late. Gavin announced the acquisition talks the way a man announces a yacht he can't afford. Loud, smug, and with absolutely no understanding of the currents he was sailing towards. He did it in the company-wide Slack channel at 6:02 in the morning M, with a message that read, and I quote, "Big waves incoming, team. Howarth Equity has entered the chat. This is legacy shifting. Strap in, strap in." Half the company was barely hanging on after his last legacy shift, which had involved surprise layoffs and a mandatory workshop called Branding Your Inner Titan. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Within 2 hours, Gavin had posted a selfie in the boardroom with the caption, "Making moves, briefcase fire behind him," a whiteboard that still had my handwriting on it from the last real planning session. He started acting like he'd already sold the place and just needed someone to hand him a balloon bouquet and a gold watch. Suddenly, he was walking around in tailored Navy suits, having loud phone calls about valuation upside and accelerated governance like he was auditioning for a reboot of Billions. He stopped using our standard conference rooms. Started using the founder's old corner office instead, the one with the frosted glass and the oak credenza no one liked to touch, called it Command. To the rest of the office, it looked like things were happening. Anyone who understood corporate anatomy, it looked like a guy rearranging organs with salad tongs. Then I heard about the audit. Helen from compliance, who still trusted me enough to talk in whispers, slid me the date in the break room like we were dealing contraband. Audit's locked for the 23rd. Crescent Capital sending their lead legal plus external compliance. Gavin's calling it the pre-ceremony. Gross, right? The 23rd, that was my bell tower. It was when the contract would need board approval and sign off. That was when the title of chair would either be honored or exposed. And Gavin had no idea I was still playing. I made a call that same afternoon to Crescent Capital's legal liaison, a woman named Nadia. Sharp, surgical, the kind of lawyer who speaks in clauses and smells blood before the scent leaves the room. She picked up on the second ring. "This is Nadia." "Mr. Desai," says Richard Cole from Apex Logistics Solutions. Pause. "I thought I know." I said I'm still on the governance file. "I just wanted to make a brief request ahead of the audit." Another pause. Shorter this time. "Go on, please ensure the corporate charter is part of your governance documentation review." I didn't explain, I didn't threaten, just let that single line hang. To her credit, she didn't push. "We'll include it," she said. "Would you like a formal receipt of review?" "Not necessary. Thank you." "Understood." Click. And just like that, the bomb was planted. Silent, legal now, timed. I didn't need to shout or storm into Gavin's office. I didn't need to make a scene. I just needed Howarth's legal team to do what they were already paid to do. Follow protocol. Verify signatory authority. Check the charter. The charter. That crusty, forgotten binder Gavin had probably used as a coaster without realizing it contained the clause that would skin him alive in front of the board. That night, I updated my email signature, Richard Cole Chair, Board of Directors, Apex Logistics Solutions. Then I printed a fresh batch of business cards. Matte finish, no frills, black serif on cream stock, authority without theater. I stared at the first one as it came off the tray. It wasn't ego. It wasn't nostalgia. It was a placeholder. For the moment, Gavin realized the house he thought he owned still had a deed with my name on it. Let him plan his little presermony. Let him pitch Crescent Capital equity on his flashy vision and overbaked metaphors about phoenixes and vertical synergy. Let him talk. I was preparing the room because when the auditors opened that charter, and they would, there would be only one name authorized to approve the deal. Mine Monday morning hit like a legal migraine. The Crescent Capital audit team showed up at 8:01 in the morning. EM sharp. 4 people in suits so sharp they could have sliced Gavin's ego in half. One was lead counsel, one was M and a compliance, one was from post-acquisition integration. And the last one, the quiet one with a leather portfolio and an expression carved from marble. That was the auditor. His name was Elias. His handshake was brief. His eyes didn't wander. Greeted the receptionist. Glanced at the branded poster Gavin had hung over the welcome desk, Apex Vanguard, where speed meets scale, and blinked once. No smile. Gavin greeted them like he was singeing a wedding. Welcome to command, he beamed. Gesturing to the conference room he'd claimed like a dog on a tree. You're going to love what we've built here. I was already seated. Quiet. Bottom of the table behind a picture of lukewarm lemon water. Not introduced, not acknowledged, just part of the furniture. Perfect. The table was laid out with glossy folders Gavin had printed over the weekend. Leadership vision, market positioning, projected synergy benefits, all fluff, no filings. His opening remarks were pure theater, a monologue about disruption, leadership, executive agility, and narrative alignment. Elias said nothing, just clicked his pen. 10 minutes in, Nadia, the one I had spoken to on the phone, walked in late, glanced at me once, then sat down without a word. She knew Gavin was mid-sentence, something about frictionless culture stacking. When Elias finally raised a hand. Let's begin with governance, he said, voice dry as a tax form. Gavin blinked, then snapped his fingers at his assistant, who rushed over with a branded binder. Absolutely, you'll see in here. We've streamlined the reporting chain, removed redundant oversight, clarified the role of the CEO, a role so decisions happen with velocity. He tapped the cover. That's the updated org structure. Clean, agile, post-traditional. Elias didn't even look down. We'll need the original corporate charter. Gavin blinked. Sorry, the original, not the abridged or internal-facing version, the filed binding charter. Gavin forced a chuckle. Right, of course. I mean, we've modernized our structure so that document's more symbolic than functional at this point. Elias didn't blink. Legally binding symbols tend to matter, especially when determining who holds final authority over change of control events. I felt it then, a pause, just a flicker in the air. The way a room holds its breath before lightning hits. Gavin glanced at his assistant again, who whispered something, then scampered out. Elias folded his hands. While we wait, Ms. Desai, you walk us through any known amendments filed with the board since the last public resolution. Nadia's voice was measured, none that I'm aware of at this time, and who currently serves as board chair. Another pause. Gavin cleared his throat. Well, we're in the process of streamlining that. I act with full executive. I didn't ask about executive operations, Elias said, voice still polite but steely. I asked who holds the title of board chair for your governance filings. Silence. Then the door opened again. Gavin's assistant walked in with a massive black binder when I recognized the moment it hit the table. It still had the gold foil imprint, still smelled faintly of copper ink and responsibility. Elias opened it slowly, flipped past the table of contents, stopped somewhere in section 3, his brow furrowed. He flipped back a page, then forward again, and then he said it's strange. Everyone turned. He looked up, eyes narrowing. Lists Richard Cole as chair. Nobody moved. Gavin's face started doing this weird pale flush dance like his blood couldn't pick a direction. He stammered, eyes flicking to Nadia, then to the rest of the team, then finally to me. It was the first time he'd looked at me all morning. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just folded my hands in my lap and tilted my head slightly. Elias tapped the binder. This signature is dated, filed, not rescinded. There any later amendments? Nadia shook her head, and in that breathless, crackling silence, I felt it, the room turning, not because I demanded it, because the paper required it. Elias closed the binder gently. "I think we'll need a break," he said, looking squarely at Gavin to review legal alignment. The room didn't explode, it imploded, slow, dense, and surgical. Elias didn't raise his voice. He didn't push back from the table or slap the binder shut. Oh, theatrics. Just that same flat voice, like he was confirming someone's mailing address, as he looked up and asked, "This charter still lists Richard Cole as board chair. Is this incorrect?" You could hear Gavin's confidence deflate like a pool toy at a cactus party. He laughed. Too fast, too loud. "Oh, that's just legacy paperwork. It hasn't been updated in years. We've moved into a different structure." Elias didn't blink. Authorized the structural change. Gavin's mouth opened, then closed, then flailed into a stammer. "Well, I mean, it was implied. After the funding round, we had discussed that I would—" "I'm not asking about discussions," Elias said, flipping to the next page. "I'm asking about formal board ratification. Was this amendment passed in a vote?" I'm not sure we documented that piece," Gavin mumbled, scratching behind his ear like the question physically itched. He didn't say a word, just sat there, hands folded, watching him drown in slow motion. The air in the room had thickened. Crescent Capital's compliance lead scribbled something on a yellow legal pad. Priya Desai closed her laptop and sat back, lips pressed so tightly they disappeared. Elias tapped the page again. "So to be clear, per this document on file, signed and unrescinded, Mr. Cole retains full authority over governance decisions, including executive appointments and approval of change of control actions. Is that accurate?" Gavin tried to summon a grin. "I mean, well, sure, if we're going strictly by the we are," Elias said. "This is an audit." Silence. Gavin's face looked like a birthday balloon that had been stomped on. The man who spent weeks calling himself the tip of the spear now looked like he'd been stabbed with the handle. Crescent Capital's team started whispering. Compliance passed a note to Elias, "Read it," nodded once and said, "We'll need to break for internal alignment, 10 minutes. Gavin seized on it like it was oxygen, of course. "Yeah, take all the time you require." They filed out quietly, calm as monks. Elias paused at the door, glanced back at me and said, "Mr. Cole, if you join us next door in a moment." "Happy to now," I replied, finally breaking my silence. As the Crescent Capital team exited, Gavin turned to me. Really looked at me for the first time in weeks. Eyes wide, posture stiff, mouth somewhere between a sneer and a desperate plea. This is sabotage," he hissed under his breath. "You planned this?" "No," I said, leaning forward just slightly. "You did. You made this bed. I just left the paperwork under the pillow." His jaw twitched. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and picked up my folder. He stared at it like it might detonate. Before walking out, I paused by the conference room door and added, "If you had bothered to read anything that wasn't printed on a hoodie, we wouldn't be here." The next room was smaller. No whiteboards, no posturing, just chairs, files, and the soft clink of pens against paper as Crescent Capital's legal team recalibrated their entire acquisition flow. Elias handed me a copy of the charter. "We'll need your written confirmation of role acceptance and any governance conditions you intend to assert during this transaction." I took the pen, got a few. I signed my name, clean, sharp, deliberate, and slid the document back across the table. The mood shifted right then, not dramatic, not thunderous, just that cold, quiet slide of weight from one end of the scale to the other. The Crescent Capital Council nodded. "Then from this point forward, all communications regarding change of control approval must go through Chair Taylor." And just like that, Gavin Vance became a spectator at his own acquisition. Just didn't know how deep the fall was going to get. Yet the door clicked shut behind Gavin with a muffled thud, leaving only the Crescent Capital team, our general counsel, 2 board members, and me in the smaller war room. The kind of conference room where things don't get discussed, they get decided. Elias set the original charter on the center of the table like it was an ancient scroll that could damn or deliver an entire kingdom. Tapped once on the signature line with a cap pen. Per Section 2.1b, any transfer of controlling interest in Apex Logistics Solutions requires written consent from the acting chair of the board. As this document indicates, and as has now been verified by both internal and external counsel, that role is held by Miss Richard Cole. He turned to our GC, who could only nod, pale and sweat slicked. The Crescent Capital lead counsel, a woman named Cora Benning, looked like she drafted SEC disclosures in her sleep, slid her reading glasses up her nose, and cleared her throat. We are not in the business of void acquisitions. If this document had surfaced after closing, it would have invalidated the hassle and triggered litigation. Our fiduciary duty requires us to ensure the consent of the current chair is on record before proceeding then directly to me. Mr. Cole, are you willing to provide that consent? I didn't answer right. Just opened my folder and laid a single sheet across the table. Not the term sheet Gavin drafted. His version had gutted pension protections, stripped retention clauses for staff, and padded his own parachute like he was leaping off Olympus. No, this one was mine, crisp, clean, brutal in its logic. I watched the board read it line by line. Staff retention minimum 92%. No layoffs for 18 months post-acquisition. Pension match to remain at current levels or higher. And Gavin's severance package reduced by 5-4% equity clawback if misconduct is confirmed, and no title consulting post-sale. Donovan, one of the few remaining sane board members, blinked hard. Where did this come from originally? I've been chair the whole time, I said. Gavin never bothered to rescind my position or even file a new governance structure. Legally, he's a very loud middle manager. Patricia, seated beside him, murmured, "My God." Cora reviewed the final clause, then looked at me. "These conditions are firm, very," I replied. "The sale goes forward under these terms, or it doesn't go forward at all." Elias gave the faintest nod, like a judge handing down a sentence he didn't need to raise his voice to deliver. That's when Gavin burst in. He hadn't been invited back in yet, but entitlement's a hell of a drug. "Are we done here?" he blurted, eyes bouncing from face to face. "Can we finalize this or what?" Nobody answered. They just looked at me. So I stood up, slid the revised term sheet down the table toward him, slowly, like lowering a blade. "What's this?" he asked, eyes narrowing. "The version of the deal that might get approved," I said. "Assuming you don't scream about it and make it worse." He snatched it up, skimmed, then stopped cold. You could literally see the blood drain from his face. His hands trembled just slightly at the bottom of the page, where his severance had been reduced from 7 digits to something that barely bought a condo in Miami. "What the hell is this?" "It's your new parachute," I said calmly. "Smaller, fewer gold threads, still functional unless you rip it on the way down." "You can't just I can, Gavin," I said, stepping closer. "Because I did. Because the law, the charter, the company, all of it still says my name, not yours." Looked at the board for backup. They looked away. Cora stood. "We, Unk.top, will make our adjustments and prepare for reigniture. Mr. Cole will forward red lines for your review by EOD." "Thank you," I said, as the Crescent Capital team filed out. Gavin just stood there, paper in hand, mouth open, trapped in that surreal moment where a man realizes he brought a kazoo to a gunfight. The last person to leave the room was Donovan. He paused at the door, glanced back, and said softly, "Next time, maybe read the fine print before you crown yourself king." And then it was quiet. Gavin sat. I didn't, because I still had one more signature to give, and he was officially just a formality. The final acquisition meeting was supposed to be ceremonial. Gavin had built it as a victory lap, even going so far as to order custom notepads with NXCX worth. One future printed in soft gray script along the top, had a photographer on standby. He wore a tailored blazer and a navy tie so tight it looked like it was holding in his last brain cell. The room was full Crescent Capital execs, Apex Logistics Solutions board members, external counsel, even a couple of junior analysts who'd been told to observe the close of a legacy-defining deal. Gavin swaggered in chin high, flashing his best VC-arm grin. He dropped his leather folio onto the table like it contained commandments. "Right, team," he said, clapping once. "Let's bring this home." The lead auditor from Crescent Capital stood up. No fanfare, no preamble, just a single clean sentence. "We've reviewed the charter. Approval must come from Mr. Cole." Gavin laughed, but it came out thin. Less amusement, more panic, dressed up in business casual. "Yeah, okay, but that's a technicality. I mean, I've been acting CEO for months now. Everyone in this room knows I've led the deal. This is a formality." The buyer's CEO, a man named Klaus, didn't even look up from his notes, just said flatly, "We don't recognize your authority here." The silence that followed didn't feel corporate, it felt surgical. Gavin's mouth opened, then closed. He looked left, right toward his own board, but found no one willing to meet his eyes. Not Patricia, not Donovan, not even his assistant, was now pretending to rearrange a water picture like her life depended on it. And then, finally, I spoke. "I'll approve," I said, voice calm even with my conditions. I slid the revised term sheet across the table. Van picked it up and read silently, page after page. When he got to the end, he glanced at Ka, who nodded once. "It's reasonable," she said, and legally sound. Gavin finally snapped. "This is a hostile hijack. She's not even involved anymore. She's been sidelined for months. This isn't how governance works." Vaughn raised one hand, not to argue, to signal. Security entered the room. Two plain clothescloth professionals, no fuss, no bark. One of them leaned down toward Gavin and said, "Not unkindly, sir, we'll need you to step out." He looked at me like I was supposed to save him, like I owed him a damn thing. I didn't even blink. "Wait, you can't just been relieved," I said. The door shut behind him with a click that sounded like a gavel. And then stillness. No cheers, no applause, just the cool mechanical rhythm of ink finding its mark. I picked up the final document, Apex Logistics Solutions Halworth Acquisition Agreement, revised and signed where it mattered. Richard Cole, Chair Board of Directors Cora, handed me the second packet, Equity Reconciliation and Oversight Retainer. $8 million in stock equity guaranteed consulting and permanent advisory access for all post-acquisition compliance procedures. I initialed every page. Across from me, Klaus lifted his glass of water and said to boring paperwork, "The kind that saves companies." I gave him a small smile and buried CEOs. He chuckled, nodded, and turned to his team. "Let's begin integration." As the room shifted into next phase planning, I stayed seated, sipped my tea, black, no sugar, from the mug I'd brought in myself. No cameras, no speeches, just me, the contract, and a name that hadn't been erased because no one had bothered to check the ink. You don't need fireworks to win. You just need to outlast the noise and own the signature line when the smoke clears. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.